What you're looking at on screen right now is not a hydrogen technology diagram. It's not a process flow diagram. It's not an electrolyzer schematic. What you're looking at is something far more important and far more dangerous if misunderstood. This single image shows where money actually enters the hydrogen system, where it exits, who captures it early, who waits years to see it, and where risk silently accumulates until projects stall, restructure, or disappear. If you understand this diagram, you understand why so many hydrogen projects look perfect on paper and still fail in reality. Let's start at the very top of the image because that's where most hydrogen conversations incorrectly begin and then immediately go wrong. At the top left, you see policy signals, mandates, and targets. These are government announcements, subsidy frameworks, decarbonization goals, and public commitments. They feel powerful, and they are powerful in one very specific way. They create intent, they unlock early capital movement, but they are not cash flow. Policy does not pay operating expenses, policy does not service debt, policy does not fix utilization problems. Policy only signals that something might be worth attempting. That distinction matters because almost every arrow below this point is driven by belief, not by proven revenue. Now follow the arrows downward from those policy signals. You see capital entering the system in the form of equity and debt. This capital flows into the project developer, or the special purpose vehicle, the SPV. This box in the center of the diagram is one of the most misunderstood roles in the entire hydrogen economy. The developer, or SPV, is not where money is made. It is where risk is warehoused. This entity is responsible for permits, grid connection, offtake negotiations, financing structure, and coordination of every other box you see on screen. It absorbs uncertainty long before a single molecule of hydrogen is produced. From this SPV box, capital begins to move outward and upward toward the equipment suppliers. Look to the left side of the image. You see the equipment suppliers box, which includes electrolyzers, compressors, balance of plant components, power electronics, cooling systems, and control systems. This is the first place where money turns into revenue. These suppliers are paid on delivery or on milestone completion. Their returns are front-loaded. Their business model is built around manufacturing margins, order volume, and factory utilization, not around hydrogen utilization at the project site. This is a critical insight. The equipment suppliers do not depend on the hydrogen plant running at 70% capacity. They do not depend on cheap power for 20 years. They do not depend on off-takers honoring long-term volume commitments. They are paid once capital is committed and equipment is delivered. That green checkmark in the diagram that says paid on delivery is one of the most important truths in the hydrogen economy. It explains why equipment manufacturers can thrive even when projects stall, delay, or quietly underperform. Their returns are decoupled from long-term operational success. Now, move your eyes back to the central SPV box, and then slightly to the right, where you see the EPC and construction layer. This is the engineering, procurement, and construction phase. This layer receives money through progress payments. The EPC contractor is paid as milestones are achieved, foundations are poured, systems are installed, and commissioning progresses. This layer sits in a more dangerous position than equipment suppliers, but still a safer one than operators. The EPC makes money if it prices uncertainty correctly. That is not easy in hydrogen because standards are still evolving, grid timelines are unpredictable, and balance of plant complexity is routinely underestimated. When projects are delayed, EPCs face disputes, change orders, and margin erosion. But importantly, even here, much of the payment occurs before long-term performance is tested. The EPC's exposure is real, but it is time-bound. Once the plant is handed over, most of the risk moves downstream. Now let's move further right, to the hydrogen plant operations box. This is where the diagram turns red, and that color choice is not accidental. This is where all the optimism embedded in the upper layers collides with physics, power prices, maintenance reality, staffing constraints, safety requirements, and debt service. This box represents the operating SPV, the entity that actually produces hydrogen day after day. Look closely at what is written inside this box. Power costs, operations and maintenance, staff, maintenance. These are fixed or semi-fixed costs. They do not scale down gracefully when utilization drops. If the electrolyzer runs at 35% instead of the modeled 65%, the power bill does not fall proportionally. Staffing does not disappear. Debt service does not pause. Insurance premiums do not shrink. This is why the red X's appear next to low utilization, high power costs, and debt pressure. This is the layer where most hydrogen projects fail, not because the technology doesn't work, but because the cash flow math breaks under stress. Now, look at the arrows flowing upward from the hydrogen plant to the lenders at the top right. This is debt service. Lenders get paid first before equity sees returns. This is not optional. If revenue underperforms, equity absorbs the pain, not the banks. This dynamic alone explains why hydrogen equity returns are so fragile. Even modest underperformance can wipe out equity value while debt continues to be serviced. Next, follow the arrow from the hydrogen plant to the off-taker. This is where hydrogen sales revenue comes from, and this is where another uncomfortable truth lives. Most off-take agreements retain flexibility for the buyer. Volumes may not be firm. Prices may be indexed or capped. The buyer often has alternatives. The producer often does not. When demand softens or when cheaper hydrogen becomes available elsewhere, the off-taker's downside is limited. The producer's downside is not. Now move your eyes to the bottom right of the diagram, where infrastructure owners sit. Pipelines, storage caverns, ports, terminals. These entities do not care about hydrogen price. They care about throughput and access fees. Their revenue comes from tariffs, tolls, and regulated returns. They are paid for allowing hydrogen to move or be stored, not for how profitable hydrogen production is. This is why infrastructure is often the long-term survivor in energy systems. It is boring, capital-intensive, slow to build, and politically complex, but once built, it is structurally advantaged. Notice how the infrastructure owners sit slightly outside the main production loop. They serve multiple users. Their risk is demand timing, not operational efficiency. If hydrogen flows, they get paid. If hydrogen prices fall, they still get paid. If one producer fails, another may take its place. This is why infrastructure capital tends to enter later, once volume certainty improves, and why it often earns steadier returns over decades rather than chasing early upside. Now, let's zoom out and look at the entire diagram as a system. Money enters from the top as belief-driven capital. It flows early and upward into equipment suppliers and EPCs. Risk flows downward and accumulates in the operating layer. Returns are front-loaded for suppliers and back-loaded for producers. This is what the sentence at the bottom of the image means when it says money flows up early, risk flows down late. It is not a slogan, it is a structural truth. This is also why so much hydrogen content feels disconnected from outcomes. Most public narratives focus on the top of the diagram: announcements, capacity numbers, gigawatts, factory expansions. Those stories align with the layers that get paid early. They do not require long-term operational success to look impressive. The real test happens years later, in the red box, when utilization, power pricing, and debt schedules collide. Understanding this diagram also explains why so many developers struggle. Developers sit in the center, coordinating everything, absorbing delays, renegotiating contracts, and carrying capital without revenue. Their upside depends on timing exits perfectly or achieving flawless execution. Time is their enemy. Every delay erodes returns. Every redesign increases capex. Every grid issue pushes cash flow further out. Developers are not villains. They are shock absorbers in a system that is structurally unforgiving. This diagram also explains why investors who do not understand energy systems often misprice hydrogen risk. They assume hydrogen behaves like software or solar. It does not. Hydrogen is an industrial system with continuous operations, high fixed costs, and complex interfaces. When utilization misses targets, losses compound quickly. This is why asking, "Is hydrogen profitable?" is the wrong question. The right question is, who still gets paid when hydrogen underperforms? And when you apply that question to this diagram, the answer becomes obvious. Equipment suppliers still get paid. EPCs usually get paid. Infrastructure owners usually get paid. Developers and operators often do not. That is not a moral judgment. It is a structural outcome. This single image also shows why subsidies alone cannot save weak projects. Subsidies enter at the top, but losses occur at the bottom. If subsidies are delayed, reduced, or misaligned with operations, they do not fix utilization problems or power volatility. They may help projects reach construction. They do not guarantee survival. If you are a developer, this diagram should change how you think about risk. If you are an investor, it should change where you look for durable returns. If you are a policymaker, it should change how you design incentives. And if you are an operator, it should validate why operational excellence matters more than headline announcements. This is why we use this diagram as a core teaching tool. It compresses years of hard-earned project experience into a single visual. You do not need 10 slides. You do not need complex equations. You need to understand where money comes from, where it goes, and where it gets trapped. If you can explain this image to someone else, you understand hydrogen at a systems level. And if you can't, no amount of technology hype will save your project. That's also why platforms like H2 Hub exist. Not to sell optimism, but to teach execution reality. To help developers, consultants, and investors understand where projects actually break and how to design structures that survive stress instead of collapsing under it. So, the next time you see a hydrogen announcement, don't ask how big it is. Pull this diagram back into your mind. Ask where the money flows first, ask who carries risk last, and ask who still gets paid if things don't go perfectly. The answers are already on the screen. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.